All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Can everybody hear me back just fine? If we still have dishes on the tables, the crew will still be coming through, cleaning up the dishes, so that's okay. When we get a chance, could somebody back go ahead and close the doors so we're not interrupted there. Thank you for coming. My name is Bob Silva. I'm the CIO for Salem-Keizer Public Schools in Oregon. Hopefully everybody knows where that's at. It's down south and west of us. The topic of this discussion is developing the leader within you, and it really is focused at non-leadership, quote unquote, staff, so not the CIOs, just the regular workers, and what some of your leaders are looking for in you to help you advance throughout the organization, because hopefully that's what everybody ultimately wants to do. And it comes down to managing your career rather than just working a job. For those that have seen me present before, you know that I generally wing it. I have slides that kind of help me cue me through the way, but for the most part, this is an extremely difficult topic to discuss because it's not well defined what leadership is, and we'll go through that. So, ground rules. Number one rule, engage. So we got an hour and 45 minutes to spend, and certainly we can do it better than just me, blurting out words to you. So definitely engage me in conversation throughout the presentation. I purposely did not fill up the slides for the time slot that we have, so I need some of that interaction with you guys to be able to fill up our time and make it useful for you. Challenge me. I'm an opinionated guy. So if you don't like my opinions, if I say Dell is better than HP and you think HP is better than Dell, challenge me on it. That's okay. That's called debate, and that's what we need between leaders and subordinates and stuff like that. You need to be willing to challenge your leaders in a respectful way. So I invite you to challenge me on any of my opinions on these topics as we go through them. Finally, number three, your mileage may vary. You all don't work for me. Some of you do, but different leaders have different styles and different expectations, so hopefully the topics that I cover are at a ground level of just common sense enough that they may work for you. But again, if there's good leaders and bad leaders, we all probably have worked for both throughout our life, so these work with good leaders. Sometimes they can work with bad leaders, but if you got a bad leader, maybe you need to look for another job. Okay, that's just reality. All right, by show of hands, who are the leaders in the room? Did you know that was a trick question? Damn, let's hope I don't catch you. Exactly, everybody should have raised their hand. That was the point of that question, is that everybody should have raised their hand. Because in one way or another, you're all leaders at some point in your life, whether it's at work or at home. For everybody that raised their hand, do you have children? You're a leader. Hopefully you're a leader. If you have teammates and you share ideas, you're a leader. So that kind of goes into the next topic of what is leadership? And this is part of the engage part, so I'm going to put these questions to you guys, because I do not have the answers for you. I don't think there is an answer to these questions. What is leadership? What is leadership to you?
Well, just to go with what someone that leads shows up the way, someone that, takes initiative.
Does anybody here take initiative? Show of hands. You're a leader. What else does leadership look like?
Vision.
Set a vision. So at the core, that's sharing an idea. Anybody share ideas? You're leaders. What else do leaders do?
Guiding a team.
Guiding a team. We all have teammates, except for maybe the very smallest of school districts that are in here. But can you lead yourself? You're a leader. How many of you feel like a leader when you're at work? A little smaller subset of hands, and that depends upon your environment and who you are. A lot of people have fears that prevent them from being able to lead at work. Fears that they may step on their coworkers' toes. Fears that they may be judged for sharing their idea that it's not good enough, that, you know, that somebody's going to judge you or it was a dumb idea or something like that. There's a lot of fears in the workplace, especially the bigger environment you have. So say when Kaiser I have 80 staff members, that's a lot of judging that can go on. So obviously in smaller teams, it's less. You have much stronger relationships with your peers. So it's a lot safer environment, but we have districts of varying sizes. I believe we have the largest, which is Portland Public in here. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to define leadership. So what does it mean to be a leader? What are some of the characteristics of a leader?
Being a good example.
Being a good example. Does anybody think they're a bad example? So that means you think you're a good example, which means you're a leader. I saw another hand. In back. Being a good listener. Empathy? Irvin?
Not quite on what you're saying, but a leader has followers.
Yeah.
Followers, you're not really leading.
Generally, yes, but can you follow yourself?
Yes.
So you can lead yourself and you can follow yourself. What are you following? You're following your idea or your vision.
You're walking in circles.
That happens too. There's many times I walk in a circle before I figure out where I'm going. What are some other characteristics?
Believe in yourself.
That's a good one.
Being a good listener.
Good listener. Delegation.
Good delegation is trust.
Gallenbeck. Perfect. So, and a lot of that we'll cover in our slides. Do you have to be perfect in all of those things we just listed to be a good leader? No. We all have weaknesses. We have strengths, we have weaknesses. I do a good job listening, I do a terrible job delegating. My team would probably attest to that. They probably wish I'd delegate more because then I wouldn't be in their way. Empathy. I have empathy, but what I don't have is the visible display of emotion. So what I feel and hear, I do not necessarily do a good job displaying for my staff. So a lot of feedback that I get from my staff, which I ask for openly, and a lot of them give it very openly, which is good, but it's hard to hear sometimes, is that I'm not a very empathetic leader because I don't create the emotional side of the relationship. I create the working side of the relationship. I make sure that I'm always in service to them. So that's never, you know, on my feedback that I'm not serving them well. It's that I don't create that emotional bond with my staff, and that's just who Bob is.
And the quality you have is self-knowledge. You're aware of what you have and you don't have, which is a good quality of leader.
Right. And like I said, we'll go through some of that stuff. So we're done, right? We already determined that everybody's a leader? Yeah? See? All right. But that's not the case, because as much of a leader as you think you are or want to be, to advance in an organization, who needs to believe that? Do you need to believe that? Yes. So that's another trick question. Who else needs to believe that? There's two other categories of people that need to believe that. The hiring manager and your peers. Your peers are extremely powerful, and we'll discuss that throughout the slides. Who can fire the CIO? Superintendent. Theoretically. Ultimately, if they wanted me gone, yeah, they could get rid of me. You guys. You guys. My team. If I'm not serving my team well, they could collect together and get me out of there. Easily. You see it in schools with principals all the time. Well, at least I have in my career. Principal comes in hard charging, making all the changes that they were asked to make. But they forgot about some of the strategies of leadership, and they pushed too hard and they lost their staff buy-in and they were gone mid-year. Anybody ever seen that happen? I've seen it happen 4 times in my career. They were good leaders, but they didn't apply the right strategies to their leadership, and their staff pushed them out because they weren't ready. I thought I was coming into something like that in Salem. Anybody know the history of Salem? I can't tell you how many of my peers told me not to take the job. Don't do it, Bob. You cannot succeed. It's a bureaucratic, red tape environment, politically charged. You can't do it. But that's exactly why I did it. A lot of us are challenge based. If you're challenge based, raise your hand. It's not everybody, but I like a challenge. That sounded like a pretty damn good challenge to me. So your team, remember, eventually, as we're talking about in this scenario, is you're looking for advancement. That means the team that you have now may eventually be subordinates, and if you don't have the right relationships with them, guess what? You think you're in power, they just became power over you. So don't forget that. Just because you rise up in the organization and you do have power and authority, they also now, when they used to be your peer, have power and authority over you. Because if you treated them like crap, you're probably going to keep doing it when you actually have some authority. But then if you have enough of them underneath you, a good leader is going to listen when they're complaining. So just keep that in mind. It's an equal relationship. So a little bit about me and my background. Came from a very abusive home. My brother caved to the abuse when he was 18. I was 16 at the time. So that really messed up my younger life. Did not graduate high school. So I'm a high school dropout. I joined the military at 17, spent 4 years there, got my GED while I was in the military, and that really allowed me to mature up because I lost a good portion of my childhood, so I was definitely still lacking in maturity at 17 years old, was not ready for adulthood yet, but military will change you and help you grow rather quickly. You don't really have a choice. So that was good for me, but that also created a drive to succeed. So anybody that's ever worked with me, for me, around me, knows that I'm driven to success. That's just who I am. And that has helped me through my life to get to where hopefully my peers would say that I'm a pretty good leader. Even though I would not be able to define for you what I've done to do that. I didn't go to school to become a leader. I didn't have, there's just no way to describe leadership. It's just got to be who you are, something that you do inside. But then it's also the skills and strategies that you use to advance your career. I see way too often people that just come to work 7 o'clock to 4 o'clock, go home, and they're happy with that. That's fine if that's what you want to do. But I see the same people want to also advance in their career, but still only come to work 7 o'clock, 4 o'clock, do their job, and go home. How effective is that? Do you think you might need to do a little more? It depends, again, on the size of the team, but we'll get to a slide here in a minute that explains why it makes a difference. So, leadership is action, not position. But it's also both. When I was talking about, who are leaders, I was talking about any of us can be leaders. But at the same time, in my position, I'm considered the leader of the department. In my district, I'm part of leadership. In my department, I have a leadership team. So leadership is what we define it to be. With the position comes authority and accountability, but not necessarily leadership. Because I think all of us could probably imagine somebody that has a position that you may not call a great leader. They're in that position because they did some of the things that we're going to talk about during this presentation. And that comes down to managing your career versus just working a job. You have to manage your career if you want to advance through the ranks. The reason I brought up my background is, I'm the CIO of Salem Public Schools. When I applied for the job, my lack of confidence in my area is my educational background. I'm self-taught on everything. I have no official schooling. I have a GED, failed out of high school, and yet I'm the CIO for the second largest district. And even though I put my application in right on the job qualifications, master's degree preferred, bachelor's degree required. Did I let it stop me from putting in my application? How many people would have ignored that and just rested on their own beliefs of who they were and submitted their application? Yeah. So, again, I took that into account, but I also knew what I was capable of. All of my references were superintendents, so I just needed a foot in the door. I just needed a chance. So don't limit yourself. Believe in whatever you want to believe. You can make your own world. It's your world. Make it what you will. But don't let other people put your chains on for you. Put your own chains on maybe, but don't let other people put your chains on. And I went through the interview process and I got offered the job and I was like, these people are dumb. But that was a stressful time for me. Really stressful time. Because it's a huge change in your life. And, in Hermiston, I led a team of 3 people. And on my first day on the job, my colleagues were nice enough to set up an all-staff meeting for me. So had to walk into a room with probably more people than I have right here and introduce myself and talk about where we're going as a team. So, but again, that's leadership. Part of leadership is sometimes faking it till you make it. I had a facade on that first day. I was scared out of my wits. But was it clearly visible for my staff? No. I'm scared right now. Even though I have a staff of 80 and talk to them regularly, this is still uncomfortable for me, but that's precisely why I do it. And I tried to get out of it this year, but then there's an open slot. And I got volunteered, or I volunteered myself. So remember, leadership is more of a mindset because your action, so if leadership is an action, your actions are based on your behavior, and what's your behavior controlled by? Your mindset and your heart. So if you think you're a leader, be a leader. If you don't think you're a leader, then don't be a leader, but don't expect to advance within your organization. So this, again, the slide's sometimes relevant, sometimes not. Somebody in the back talked about leadership being an act of service. For me, and why these 2 images came together is because I'm in servitude to my staff, to my district, to my boss. When I fail, it's my fault. When they fail, it's my fault. When my superintendent fails, it's my fault. Because I see that as my job and my service to my team, to my organization, to my superintendent. So again, it all depends on your mindset, but service is a key component of leadership. Can you be an effective leader and not provide service? Possibly. Again, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. If your strengths can overcome your weaknesses, you can still be a good leader. So keep that in mind with all of these topics, that there's always a balance. If you're too far imbalanced on one side or the other, then you may struggle, but as long as you're balancing your strengths and your weaknesses, you can still be successful. Know where you want to go. Even though I'm the CIO for the second largest school district in Oregon, I still think about what's next. I don't have the educational background to move up to superintendent, nor do I think I would want to. That's a really hard job. But and it's not a job that I would want to do because I'm a tech guy. But know where you want to go. So I'm thinking about, okay, what's next in my life? And maybe there's nothing next. Maybe I retire out of Salem Kaiser in another 15 years, if I'm lucky. But what's next? The state CIO job for Oregon just opened. That went through my mind. Is that something that I would want? The fact that it's working for the state, probably not. I would not want to go and work for the state because it's too much of a political culture. You know, I have children at home that I need to feed and, you know, mortgage payment to make, and so I'm just not in a position for that environment. But maybe Nike CIO position opens up. Maybe I step out of K-12. So, but I'm always thinking for what's next. You should be always thinking for what's next. If you're a network analyst, when I started at the ESD, in around ESD in 1997, I was brought in as the web developer, and Cindy, I was the fifth employee at the time. I saw what Cindy did, and I'm like, hey, that looks pretty cool, and she gets paid more than me. Maybe I want to be a network analyst. Even though I was hired as a web developer, still did that for a few more years, but then I got network analyst, and then there was, hey, that school district, they probably need somebody like a consultant to really help move them on, so I moved into that. And eventually, I lobbied to create an IT coordinator position. I developed my own job description, handed it over to the boss, and he agreed and became IT coordinator for Intermountain ESD. It's about managing your career, looking for those opportunities, and not always just waiting for an opportunity to arise for you. But sometimes you just want to be a network administrator, and that's what you want to do. You don't want to move up, you're happy with what you're doing, there's nothing wrong with that. It's up to you. But if you want to advance, that's the purpose of this presentation, is to give you some strategies and things to be thinking about as you try to maneuver through that. If you're in a larger organization, it's difficult. When I just hired for what we call an MCS2 position. It's the lead positions in our desktop support team. We have 26 desktop support people. So you're 1 out of 26 shot. Does that sound like good odds? A lot of competition. How do you make, huh?
It does to me.
It does to him. So Joe is one of the successful candidates out of the 26, or I think we had 15 that applied. And that's concerning to me on another way is what's wrong with those other 11 that they're not looking to advance? Am I doing something wrong? Do they not feel it's a safe environment? The answer is yes to all of those questions. Culture takes a long time to change, and we're still working on changing. But yeah, know where you want to go. And don't blind yourself to, I'm just a network analyst, that's all I can do. I started out as a web developer in 1997. So, make your own road. So, this is a representative picture of my staff. Who do you see? Here. So, how do you make yourself stand out from your peers, from outside candidates that are coming in, that maybe have better backgrounds and more knowledge? Do you think you can still beat them out in an interview process? What do you have that they don't have?
Confidence.
Possibly, but you don't necessarily know that. What do you have that they don't have?
Institutional knowledge, relationships.
Back there, who said that?
Relationships.
You have the relationship. That's powerful, and we'll go into that later. You have the relationship with that hiring supervisor, and if you manage that properly, that will benefit you. We're humans. We strive on relationships. We live on relationships. So to go into an interview and say that relationships don't matter, that's just a lie. So I think this is probably the most powerful slide for me. It's one of the reasons I do these. I've done them since late 90s, maybe early 2000s, presenting, sharing my knowledge with my peers. Used to be able to fit in the little Y East room. Now they need to fit in these larger rooms, and that's okay. But share your ideas. Even though knowledge is power, quote unquote, there's a reason why it's quote unquote. It's false. Knowledge can be powerful, but it's even more powerful when you share it with others. Because what does that enable you to do? Yeah, it enables you to delegate, but why do you seek knowledge to begin with? To better yourself, to become more knowledgeable, right? So once you learn this new thing that you're doing, what happens? Do you have time to go learn new knowledge? You might if you do it at home. But if you're in the workplace, share the knowledge, have somebody else do that stuff, go learn something new. So sharing knowledge is powerful. It enables you to, one, continue growing new knowledge, but it empowers your teammates as well. And again, comes back to those relationships. If you're sharing your knowledge and you're building your teammate, are you one of the black people or one of the orange people? And that wasn't a racist statement, I just want to clarify that. You're the orange guy. You're standing out. You're visible within your organization. One of the biggest things that I try to teach my staff, and so my staff had not been clued in on this, and I'll see how well I do. What statement do I constantly remind you guys about that would correlate to this? It may not be obvious. Okay, it's not obvious. How many of you fix problems? This was a trick question, you failed. How many of you develop solutions? That's where your hand should raise up. And that's a mindset. It's a mindset. It's difficult at times. I tell my staff this all the time. My help desk technicians, they do an awesome job. They fix, 30,000 tickets a year, I think we're averaging. But because of their current skill set, all they can do is fix the problem. To develop a solution, you have to have a broader experience. If you're working on a desktop and it's a server-related issue, but you're not a server administrator and have no knowledge of server administrator, how are you going to develop a solution for that? You can't. You can only fix the problem. So expand your skill set. That opens other doors to move into other areas. Who's the lead technician in Salem Kaiser?
By what? What's your measurement?
Who's the lead technician?
All of us. I mean, it's the team. It's not just one person. It's not one person. It's all our
Where do all problems ultimately end up?
you.
Me. And that's the way that I was in Hermiston. That's the way I was at the ESD. I can do every job in my department, not because I'm arrogant, not because I think I have to, but ultimately, where does every problem end up? On your CIO's plate, but why can't it end up on your plate? A lot of problems would end up in my plate even when I wasn't the CIO because I built that breadth of knowledge. Some of it was intentional, some of it was just happenstance. I do a lot of readings, I invest in my own personal development. Anybody know the difference between personal development and professional development? Yep.
Yeah. So I look at that as, professional development, I'm looking at my skills in my profession. What do I bring to work? My personal development is the development of myself and how I show up in that position. Is I think of it relating to the professional.
Right.
My personal development might be how I show up in my personal life as well.
Organizations don't care about people. People care about people, and you care about yourself and your career path. So there's an organization that have an investment in you being long, you might want to.
So there's no single definition. The definition I use is professional development. That's what I provide my staff. The staff that are here today, I'm providing them professional development. The personal development, that's what you do outside of your working hours. That's what gets you to be that orange guy stepping out of the line. Because otherwise you're just doing your job. And again, if that's what you want to do, no problem with that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But if you want to advance and be seen, you need to go beyond that and create your own opportunities, your own knowledge, and that's what's going to create the light bulb in your supervisors or your higher ups. They're going to see, hey, man, he's a desktop support guy, but he was just fully integrated into the Active Directory conversation we're having. So when he interviews for that network supervisor or that network administrator position, server administrator, is that going to stand out in the hiring in my mind? Like, man, I had a great conversation with him, and he really now knows what he's doing in this field. So expand your knowledge. For my staff and myself, we use Safari Books Online. Bought just a subscription for every staff member. Every computer book you could ever want or dream, and that's even today, that's still what I do in some spare time, not all spare time, but I'm constantly expanding my knowledge, even on technical subjects. So think big, develop solutions, not fix problems. That's powerful. Because if you just fix some problems, what happens if you got 15,000 workstations? How many times do you have to fix that problem? 15,000 times. What happens if you develop a solution? How many times you got to fix it? Once. But again, depending on the work that you do, if you don't have the knowledge to think big enough to develop those solutions, then you need to work on gaining that knowledge. If you're desktop support, you should be understanding everything that you need to know, depending on your environment, of course, about Active Directory, group policies, SCCM. You should be learning that proactively because it impacts your job. And if you learn it, doesn't mean you have power to change anything, but you can go to your server administrators and say, hey, if we had a GPO that did this, it would help me solve this problem that's affecting all the machines. That's leadership. You're leading your networking team or your server administrators to help you out, and that enables you to do other things more efficiently. When I started at Salem Kaiser, we had 40-ish desktop support staff. 50?
45,
45? How many do we have now?
26.
26. Because we develop solutions now instead of just fixed problems. Our response times with the 45 people were approximately
6 weeks.
response times right now.
Hours. Which is a big state.
Solutions make a difference. And I know it's super simple to say that, but it makes a difference. Be the person that shows yourself that you're thinking big because you're taking problems off your supervisor's plate. You're taking problems off your CIO's plate. You're just fixing problems by developing solutions. You're supposed to be engaging here. I'm halfway through my slides and we still got a lot of time left. Any questions? Come on, somebody's got a question. I'm not moving on until I have a question.
Well, I just want to say I appreciate that so much, that idea of developing solutions, because in that is just a lot of things. One of them is you can't do that in isolation. So you've got to bring people together to be able to do that. And you've got to find opportunities for people maybe who wouldn't step up but do have some incredible, not just knowledge, leadership skills, to be able to combine to do that.
Absolutely.
So, I think that builds teammanship in such a big way, and also empowers people who may not have been those ones raising their hands.
And it gets them to start thinking differently. Our networking team and our desktop support team, I wouldn't call them siloed anymore, but because of our workload, it's still not like this, as much as I would like it to be. I even gave them one name to help overcome that. So they're no longer, they're separate names, but they're one name. So they're enterprise services and enterprise support, so desktop support and the network and server, but they're ESS. So they're enterprise services and support. But again, due to our workload, we don't get like this. But if we can get just a few people thinking about solutions instead of fixing problems, that will just spread like a virus throughout that team. And they'll start to learn how their work impacts the other team, because it goes both ways. And I see it almost daily where the impact goes both ways. But if we start thinking about solutions instead of fixing the problem, that'll create a teamwork and a bond between those two teams where they will actually become one. And I can't move on from Salem until we achieve that. So hurry up. Cindy?
You haven't had any territorial issue with that kind of, where desktop has tried to create solutions and talk to service. That's not your job.
I'll let the desktop supervisor answer that.
You said you haven't had that problem, we used to live that, but, it also matters what kind of support you're getting from the top. Because it's very difficult to break down those walls from the bottom up. But, you know, my peer is here, and, we routinely end up in each other's office going, okay, here's what we're seeing going on, I'm gonna go at it this way, you go at it that way, and we're collaborating to offset some of that, team building. You know, we're doing the, you know, underground manipulation to drive them to be working together. But the volume is one of the things that really brings a challenge to that. And the more we work together, the easier that volume is to handle. So, Nate's.
Combined, it's about 50 people between those two teams. How do you get 50 people focused on this?
Well, and you're still, like you say, time management and all that.
Sure. And everybody's stressed, and you know, if you work for me, I'm pushing you. You have high expectations sitting in front of you. And so I don't know if I have a slide for that. Again, I'm trying to stall for time, so high expectations. How many of you have ever been accused of having high expectations? Does it feel like that, or is that just me? Until I got the role of director, which I barely got because my expectations were too high, as the feedback of that my hiring body in Hermiston received, was that my expectations were too high. There's nothing wrong. Say what?
That's not a bad thing.
Perhaps I was pushing too hard for it. I'm much older and wiser than I was in my younger years, and maybe in my younger years, I didn't account for this part of trying to reach my expectations. I pushed my peers too hard. But now I can push my staff hard. Having the high expectations, I'll come back to you in 1 second. There's nothing wrong with that. Set them as high as you can reach. Don't penalize yourself, don't penalize your teammates, don't penalize your subordinates if you don't meet it. It's not about meeting the expectations, it's about setting them high enough that you're pushing yourself to do new things, and maybe you just improve yourself a little bit each time. But that's okay, because you're improving yourself, and even if it's just a little bit, that's good enough. When we did our VoIP phone system, and you probably heard this before, told my team, I'll give you 4 months. 4 months to deploy 5,000 phones. You know what my senior VoIP engineer told me? And this was a year on the job, so he didn't really know. You're crazy. I was like, no, I've done the math. You can do it. It's math. I deployed 500 phones in Hermiston with 3 people in 3 days, I think it took us. So I just did the math and said, okay, I'll give you 4 months. The math said it would take 3 months. You know how fast I got it done? 3 months. 14,000 Chromebooks. How long did it take us to do those?
6 days.
6 days. Now, if I use conventional thinking with 14,000 Chromebooks, and if you've done this and you did 6 weeks, I'm not judging you. So please don't hear it like that. But if I use conventional wisdom, how long would you guess it would take for you and your team to deploy 14,000 Chromebooks? Depends on the size of your team, I understand that. But you would probably think, all summer long to be able to unbox them, configure them in Google Admin, get them in the carts, wire the carts, deploy the carts. So when we moved from XP to 7, it took 2-ish years. How long did it take us to move to Windows 10? 3 weeks. Within 1 year. So when I got there in 15, we were midway through the project. We'd been moving from XP to 7 for a year. We finished it up, and then the next summer, I told my team, we're moving to Windows 10, and we're going to do it in a couple weeks. Again, they thought I was crazy, but I provided the tools, the leadership, the expectations, and the belief that it could be done. And I told them, hey, you got all summer. We got the summer. They came back to me 3 weeks later and said, hey, we're done. Would that have happened if I had set the expectation too low? There's nothing wrong with high expectations unless you penalize people for not meeting it. Then you're just generating fear. And if you generate fear, you can't move anywhere. So keep that in mind. And it's okay to set high expectations. Cindy, when we worked together, did I have high expectations of you? And you had high expectations for me, and we pushed each other.
Heartfelt conversations about expectations, because we both are clear up the sky and got told.
But we pushed each other. But we never penalized or judged or, ridiculed for anybody that couldn't meet those expectations.
We were judging ourselves.
Oh yeah, because it's my fault. It's your fault, right? You had a question.
You kind of covered most of it, but maybe I word it differently. So the fear of failure, I try to encourage failure in a way, because I know that if you are worried, I'm in the network team, I've worked with help desks all over, and I've been in that position, and a lot of times they tend to yield to the higher level in the organization, people, because they just assume that they're not going to know, but you will. And so they don't want to say this. They don't want to bring up, I think we should do this, or maybe we could do that, because they're worried that either you're going to be right instead, or that they're wrong. And so if you don't encourage that failure to just say it, if you're wrong, wonderful. Thank you for telling me. So you kind of have to be wrong to be right a lot. I have a thing where I spray out ideas. One of them's bound to work or be right. Just toss it out there. Don't worry about it. If you're going to be wrong, it's okay. So I try to convince them that it's okay. Be wrong and tell me about it. That way we can both get better. Don't be scared. Do not be scared. You can't be. You won't move.
I think safety and trust is a big thing.
If you ever worked with me or for me, you know I make a lot of mistakes, but I'm willing to take that risk. I did a presentation on IT glue last year. Was anybody here for that? Are we still running IT glue? Nope. I won't tell you how much it cost me, but it was a bad decision that I made. But once I realized it was a bad decision, I wasn't scared. Well, I already invested in it, and that it would be irresponsible to move. I'm willing to bite the bullet, deal with whatever issues I got to deal with, but move in a different direction to do the right thing. And I accidentally unplugged myself here.
Our last IT director had this awesome thing that helped me drive was he wanted to help everybody in the IT department to grow, to be able to promote them, but not just promote them within the organization, but promote them beyond what the organization needs and outside of.
Keep going.
So it was nice because my position there was computer technician, level 3 was the highest, but in industry there's higher levels, and to help me promote myself outside of the organization.
Absolutely.
Let's pretend
Come
it's
on,
not
somebody
here for
fill
a
in for me here. I'm struggling.
while. Yeah. What do you-
Well, I think that's a really important point, is supporting that growth as leadership and developing that within your organization. And an understanding that there's going to be, or an expectation that there's going to be that growth. Working in an international school, I was having a hard time that international teachers rotate every 2 or 3 years. Just, it's a hard treadmill process. Once they came into the mindset of, we're gonna have these guys for 3 years, we're gonna take advantage of their expertise, and we're gonna be ready for the next one to come. Once that mindset shift happened, it was really a tremendous process, because the negative side of like, well, they're gonna have it for a while too. Oh, wow, this is great, we're gonna be ready for the next one. And I think with the technology, it's a big thing.
Our friends on the education side are calling that a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, and that's just technology. Like you just have to learn it's going to change. So next roll, next update, and then you stick it, and then you roll with it and figure out how that works. That's just the way we roll.
So you have your rock star tech that's rolling.
And with education, it just rolls every 10 years. So you have a recycling of language and new phenomenon that repeats itself.
I'm sure.
Talking about growth and a few other things we talked about, I came up with a question. We've developed a solution that has the potential to help in a lot of different areas, but to do that, you may need to make a case to hire additional staff. How would you go, do you have any pointers for a situation like that? How to make a case to your superiors for something in that regard?
I just go make my case to my superiors and say, this is what I need.
Sure, but
Well, and again, that comes back to this. And I gotta be careful, because my superintendent may watch this. How cool is that, to have a superintendent that would be interested enough in you to watch a session that you give at a tech conference?
Just saw your mic fiasco.
Yeah. I'll do some editing, because I'm not to edit out things. The problem, these videos are great that we do them and you can share them with your peers and stuff, but they don't cover the slide deck. So I'm going to edit mine to overlay the slide deck and have more of that, less of me speaking. I wish that we could do that. If you ever watched the Microsoft Ignite video, that's ideally how the videos can be done. They interchange between the slide deck and the presenter, and you never miss out on anything watching the video. Whereas ours, it's just the presenter. Sometimes they can capture the slide deck. That's why I use yellow, because it's a lot more contrasting. So I'm hoping the video will kind of pick up the contrast and show you what's actually on the slide. That's also why I'm trying to stay somewhat close to this.
Don't let that stop you. You gotta do it with mindset. There's something you say, no, that's a drag. I say yes. If you don't ask a question, you never have the opportunity to ask. So don't let it stop you.
Over here.
Yeah, just to speak to your question, having gone through this so many times over the years with different superintendents, everybody has a love language, right? And so you got to know the relationship with your superintendent will tell you, is this a data person? Is this the person that you can speak to? Worst case scenario being the reason why we have to do this. Watch out for this. We need to make a change, or else. Or is it a growth-minded person where they're just always looking for a new opportunity? So if you speak to that language, you have a lot better chance of success. Unfortunately, if it's a data person, that means you're going to have a lot of spreadsheets to present. But if you do the work, that's the only work you have to do. Once you turn that in, they're going to go, yep, I bless it, go. So just that relationship piece is important, and then using that to facilitate the conversation.
Okay. Another way to look at it is sometimes you need to give up something to get something.
Right.
I wanted to implement a computer rotation when I got into Salem Kaiser. For us in our current volume, it's about $3 million a year. My budget was full. But I knew coming fresh on the job, coming into Salem Kaiser, I wouldn't be able to just go ask my superintendent, hey, you got an extra $3 million you can throw in my budget so I can implement a computer rotation. First year, she gave me $2 million out of our May adjustment, and this was the up years, so we had the capability. As I got to know my budget, I started making decisions differently than we had made in the past. Second year, I only needed $1 million to get us to a computer rotation. This year, or last summer, I didn't need any money. So in the existing budget that I had, I was able to build in a $3 million computer rotation. So if I went to my superintendent and said, I need staff, do you think it's going to be instant no, or do you think she's going to hear me out? But I'd probably still go, hey, I could probably shift this stuff around over here to be able to pay for some of it. So it's a negotiation, but the relationship and proving yourself and what you can do benefits that relationship. Are you in a position to influence that decision?
Yes.
So, what are you willing to give up? So you say this thing would save a lot of time and money and stuff like that. Are you willing or able to give anything else as part of that negotiation? It's really just, and then put it on paper. If we spend this is what's going to save us. So, Blue.
Oh, I was just gonna comment on I think that you were talking yesterday, you mentioned that, thank you for bringing the data, getting hard numbers to make the case for the position or whatever it is you want to do. Was, good answer to that question.
The relationship, slightly different spin. I can't remember where I heard it. The report was this personal advancement. We don't find our jobs through our close Google. We find it through the loose relationships, like people you meet here. It's because that expands your net so much wider. So that's creating those loose relationships. The value of that's where most jobs are found. It's not because if you already knew about it, you'd be there. It's the ones you haven't yet been exposed to, which is why you need to keep expanding those relationships. It's a strange concept that's the studies have shown that you have to expand relationships to know what's out there. So what you were trying to get to, you may not even know about, or you would be there.
In regards to transparency, people don't just typically, people don't say no for zero reason. And one thing we have to do is A, anticipate the reasons they'll say no before we go into it. And B, if they are going to say no, the leadership needs to have the mindset of, well, I should maybe let you know why I'm saying no. A lot of people are they don't know. They don't know what's going on. Why did you just turn me down? They won't tell you. You have to be able to talk to them in reverse and say, here's why I said no to prepare you for next time. Otherwise, you'll never get it. That's too common. So both ways it should go.
In K-12 specifically, asking for more money is always a challenge. And you just have to, kind of going back to him, you have to know them and how to approach them. My superintendent is very supportive of me, but I know I can't just go ask. I have to have the full picture of why and what the long-term benefit of this is. Even if it's going to cost more money to do it, I still have to have the full reasoning behind it. And if she says no, okay, I'm okay with that. That's what she gets paid to do. No?
So, just the glasses.
Back. dirty little secret in K-12, there's always money. You just have to find the right person that has it and convince them to invest it.
It's always about priorities.
Yeah.
If your priority is higher than something else, then helping.
There's always money. You just gotta figure out how to get to it.
I think it's return on investment. If you were to come to me and ask me for more people, my first question would be, what's in it for me? If you need more people and we have, see if you're helping, you're gonna say, I can't do this for myself as one person. How many more tickets can we handle if we have one person? Or how much more this can we do? Can you delegate some of your skills to this person so we can take it to the next level? That's what we should be able to say, this is, give me this and I can do this for you. And then you have enough data on it. Because they get asked every day for more stuff. They want more people, they want more money, they want more devices, whatever, but every day management's getting inundated with requests for stuff. And if you can bring a reason why you need to make them up better, then that's what they want.
And when you're talking people, it's complicated even more by the fact that if you need people, what else doesn't the district get? Teachers, right? It's a balance. It's a fight between classified and licensed. Classified usually loses, and that's okay. That's the way it should be. But for a classified department to request more people, that usually means that that's less teachers in the classroom. So it's a hard battle. Make sure you have your data and your logic right. I haven't had to go ask for staff. I've rearranged. When you have 80, you have a lot more flexibility to readjust. I think very few people have the same job titles. Sometimes it feels like in my department from when it first started.
So getting back a bit to the relationship topic, yeah, you've talked about, it sounds like there's been a lot of churn in your organization over the last couple of years, just rearranging everybody. And with change comes a lot of anxiety for the team and the whole district, knowing that there's a lot going on. You know, well, my tech person's not gonna be here anymore, you know, I'm gonna get somebody new. What are some of the strategies that you use to bring everyone along with that vision you had?
First and foremost with my staff is just building trust. When I got there, there was probably a fear of the director, not necessarily the person, but the position or the office. I had people tell me, yeah, you know, I did a one-on-one. I've done multiple one-on-ones with staff, and it's 80 people, so it takes a little while to, you know, allocate that much time. But you know, I can't tell you how many people came in and said, this is the first time I've talked to the director. And they've been there for 15 years. That was the culture that I came into, where the director was just off limits. It was, you know, just the decision maker, no relationship. And even though, again, I create professional working relationships, not, hey, Ben, let's go out and go, you know, hunting relationships. And that's what some people need. So that's my weakness. I consider that my weakness, whether it is a weakness or not, is up for debate, but I consider it my weakness to be able to develop those personal relationships with staff. But it's really just about building the trust with them. And then, you know, I think generally my staff has adapted well. When you talk about technicians, obviously shifting technicians around has an impact on the school. We've all probably heard the call, what do you mean you're moving Johnny away? He's the best. There's no way you can do any better than him. We tackled that by creating feeder systems. So initially any tech of the 45 could show up at your building. So no relationships existed between IT and the school district. So we created feeder systems, and each one got kind of a level 2 person and then 3 or 4 technicians. And so they can build a relationship, but once you've built that, you can still move 1 or 2 around. And as long as those others still have the relationship, it gives you a lot more flexibility. Because I also believe there's value in moving technicians around to other schools. We have 65 schools. So, you know, if you leave them there too long, that's just a silo of information. So it limits them, it limits your department from growing So every now and then, it's good to just pluck one out. Don't kill all the relationships, leave some of that foundation there, but pluck one out and move them and give them a different opportunity to spread their knowledge around and learn new knowledge from new teammates. But like I said, it's got to be strategic in everything you do. So let's talk about relationships, because we haven't really talked about this. So relationships go all directions, and they're dependent on what position you're in. For me, obviously, I have relationships with my staff, with my peers, with my leadership, with administrators, with teachers, with custodians. So in my position, relationships are the foundation of the work I do, because I can't do anything if I have bad relationships. I could, but then I probably wouldn't be a very good leader, because now I'm just dictating. I'm using the authority of my position to just dictate, this is what you will do with technology. But that's not my style, so I need relationships to be able to do the things that I'm trying to do within Salem Kaiser. I see, too often, I've seen it big districts, small districts, where this is forgotten or undervalued way too much. Is everybody best friends with their coworkers in the room? The answer will be no. We're people, we have personalities, and that doesn't always jive perfectly with everybody on our team or everybody in our district, depending on your position or level. But that doesn't mean that you can't be a professional and have an appropriate working relationship with those individuals. I see it forgotten all too often that it has an impact. And again, it depends on your leader. If I see you being a jerk in the office, your possibility for advancement is lowering every day, because for me, relationships are important. So what am I looking for when I hire? I'm looking for people that share my values, right? Because I would say relationships are one of my values. Therefore, that's what I'm looking for, because I'm a human. You're looking for different things too, but you're also looking for people that share your values. But I don't think it should just be my values, it should be everybody's values. You should treat everybody you work with respectfully and build that bond, because you're going to be more successful. You're going to be happier at work. But too many people forget about the relational aspect of their jobs, and it doesn't matter what position you're in, you have a relational aspect to your job. If you treat your coworkers like crap, you're forgetting this core value that you should have, and it's impacting your capability to advance within the organization. I can promise you that. One way or another, it will impact your ability to advance in the organization, regardless of who your leader is. So this kind of speaks to the high expectations, but you need to build this for yourself. Is good good enough? Sometimes. But again, this is about how do I help, what knowledge can I share with you guys to help you advance throughout the organization? So it's really about how do you prove to your supervisors, your leadership, that they want to pick you when you interview for that position. Or even if you're interviewing in a different organization, how do you get identified? So for me, good is never good enough. I go for great. Sometimes I only reach good, but I'm always going for great. So again, it's setting that bar, setting those expectations. When I went into the interview, and one of the things I told the excuse me, superintendent and the people around the table was, this is Salem's the capital of Oregon, so I think Salem School District should probably be the best in the state to represent that. And that's what I'm trying to achieve in Salem. Still got a long ways to go. There's money issues, there's staff issues, there's 5,000 people in the district that I got to get moving in the same direction. So it's a heck of a challenge. Requires a lot of leadership, a lot of relationships to get 5,000 people moving in one direction. Now I could just use my authority and say, this is what we're doing, but that doesn't work. Or it only works for so long and then you're replaced. Because remember, those people that you're working for have as much power as you do. So strive for the great. Doesn't mean you reach it, but you strive for it. And if you're constantly talking about the great in conversations with your peers, with your leaders, who's in the interview room? Now, I know this is dependent on size and organization, but for my organization, your peers around the department, not the team, around the department are the ones that are hiring, giving you that opportunity. So you need to stand out. If you just focus on your work, they don't know who you are. But if you're working on those relationships, and if you're going for the great, we talked about solutions, and somebody brought up somewhere that you need other people to achieve that. Well, those other people are sometimes in your department.
What are your thoughts on, and maybe it's a style question for you, around folks within your area working on their relationships within sort of the hierarchy or the structure of your team, or working outside of that hierarchy, building relationships with people outside your hierarchy, your peers, other directors, other leaders within other teams, and balancing all that with their competing goals and interests and or silos. Just curious what your thoughts are on that. How do you keep everybody going in the same direction if you're encouraging relationships outside your hierarchy and suddenly cultivating ideas, initiatives that may be going in different directions?
So, clarification, are you asking that because they're creating that relationship, that may create?
I'm just curious, like, as people build relationships, do you like to see them within a hierarchy or a flat structure?
Doesn't matter. I expect all of my staff to build relationships with all of our staff as a school district, because that empowers. They are an extension of my position, so not necessarily me, but of my position. So if they've built a strong relationship and then that person hears about this technology initiative, are they more likely to support it or less likely to support it, even though they have no idea who I am, and the majority of our staff have no idea who I am at our size? There's 5,000 staff members. As much as I would like to meet them all, it's not a reality. So how do I create influence? Because one aspect of leadership is influence. How do I create influence over them? I do it through my staff and the services we provide. So I would absolutely encourage them to create any relationship, whether it was principal, if they want to create a relationship and have the time and mechanisms to create a relationship with the superintendent. I don't care. As long as they're not going behind my back to use it against me or against the position or the direction of the department, because that's a whole nother issue. Yes, that can happen, and yes, I'm sure it does happen. I haven't seen it. I've been lucky. I have a great staff. I think they support me 100%. So I haven't had to deal with that, but I can certainly see where that could be an issue.
Well, maybe it's just a function of having a very clear vision and then trusting your staff to align, and then working independently to build that network of relationships to move towards that common goal.
And if your staff isn't aligned, did you build the right vision? Were they part of it? Our vision statement, I think it was our vision statement. I let my staff develop our vision statement as a department. I didn't pick one. I put it out to the staff and let them collaborate and vote, and it eventually came out to leading the way in technology for education. So the staff themselves developed that vision statement.
As much as we'd like to have a hierarchy of communication channels work, if you're not going beyond your department to wherever in the district and have your ears open, you're missing a whole lot of information that's going to be vital to your department. As the don't hear about that initiative till they've already decided it's way too late. So it's partially defensive, you know, what's happening in all those corners.
Okay, I believe we have half an hour. I'll just let you read this for yourself. The key part is, you know, the measure of who we are is what we do with what we have. K-12, we have limited resources. That's a reality of our jobs. We can try to fight it. We can be disappointed. We can try to ask for more people to help out to develop the solution. If you can't get those people, will you still try? Or will you just give it up? Because again, a lot of times you have to think about, okay, what do we have, rearrange, rethink. You won't be successful every time, but you'll be more successful than if you'd never tried it all. And if you fail, hopefully you have, you know, superintendent and leadership that will support you in that failure. I was just talking to somebody from Evergreen, and he was telling me how the superintendent comes into the team and just, what's your problem today? And meaning, you know, what can I do to support you? What are your challenges for the day? How awesome is that? For a superintendent of Evergreen, and it's a larger school district, to just come in, sit down and say, how can I help you today? So if you have that superintendent, try to fail. They'll support you in that. But it's not just at the upper levels of the relationship. If you have a good CIO or a good supervisor, if they're supporting you, try to fail, because what we see is somebody that's trying. We don't necessarily see the failure. We'll support you through the failure. We want to see the try. We want to see you do what you can with what you have and think differently and creatively and try to move forward with whatever our vision statement is or whatever our goals are. We just want to see you trying. We want to see you be the yellow guy stepping out of the line. That's what we see, and that's what we reward eventually through a hiring process. Again, it's not some super secret thing, it's just reality. We're humans. If you're constantly in my face and showing me how good you are, as opposed to a teammate that maybe just comes to work, does a good job, but doesn't spend any time creating a relationship with me, doesn't show that they're trying to, you know, expand their knowledge, supporting their teammates, who are you going to hire? That's just a basic reality. But in our team environment, when I first got there, there's a lot of accusations of cronyism and stuff like that. So I do very little of the hiring, and I invite one person from each team into the interview committee, and we run through a matrix. We all have them, and that's what determines our hiring. So that's where those relationships come into play, because it's your peers that are hiring you. I just look like the hiring manager, or my supervisors just look like the hiring manager. It's your peers that are hiring you, so show them that you're worthy to be hired. I thought this was appropriate so the way I build my slides is I have a Shutterstock subscription because, you know, you gotta have a good repository of images. So I ran across all of these, and then I had to find images to go with it. So when I thought about that with Stephen Hawking's recent passing, I'm like, there's a guy that really did something with what he had available to him as ALS took over his life. It didn't limit him, it didn't stop him. He figured out how to move beyond his physical limitations. That's what we should all be doing in our work, because again, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. How do we overcome those weaknesses? So the next few slides are about things to think about. Follow through on what you commit to. One of my pet peeves is when you tell me you're going to do something and you don't do it. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, because I'm really I probably take this to the extreme. If I tell you I'm gonna do something, I'll figure out how to do it. If that means working till 1 or 2 o'clock at night, I'll squeeze it in. And if I don't, I feel that I failed you. And, you know, I don't know if that's a weakness of mine, but I feel like I failed you. If I committed to you, I will get it done, then hell or high water, I'm getting that done because my word is my bond, quote unquote, but it's important that you follow through on your word. Too often I see that we tell our customers, yeah, you'll get a call or we'll send you an email when it's done or something like that, and we don't follow through on it. How does that customer feel when technology said that we were going to do something and we didn't do it? We get 2 or 3 negative feedbacks a year. 2 or 3. Out of 30,000 tickets, we get 2 or 3 negative feedback, and it's usually because we didn't follow through on what we told them we were going to do. Consistently, that's the reason. So if you're gonna basically make a promise, and that's what you're doing when you tell somebody I'm going to do it, you're making a promise to them, make sure you follow through. And this can be wrapped up in many ways. Be honest. Anybody not honest? Okay, so we have a lot of dishonest people in here, but I get it. The camera's facing this way, so it was safe to answer. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, just be honest. You know, that's one of the ones that I was hoping to come out of the what characteristics do leaders have. Honesty and integrity, those are 2 common ones that you often hear. I think most people, 99% of the people that are in K-12 have honesty and integrity. Not all of them, though. Keep your eyes open, because if they're not, then that can also impact you at some point in the future. So, especially in a much larger environment where politics come into play. And yes, K-12 does have politics. And I live in the state capital, so we have a little more than regular. So.
That last one's intention is in tension with having high expectations, well, back to expectations long term. It's in tension with don't overpromise.
Know your own limitation. You know, sometimes most of the time I try to say, I'm on it. I'll take care of it. I'll do it tonight. Sometimes I fail. When I'm more clear-minded, I'll say, I'll get that to you in the next week. So make sure you frame your timeline and don't overcommit. Sometimes I overcommit as I get older. For those of you old people in the room, your memory actually does decrease as you get older. So that's my biggest problem. If you're applying for a job and you're like this, the likelihood of getting the job is probably going to be lower. Okay? Don't hope for a job. You should be doing all the stuff that we're talking about today so that when you're going for the job, you feel like this. So again, don't confuse this with arrogance. Because arrogance, you might as well put yourself in the other picture where I hope I get it. I hope they didn't see all of my arrogance over the last few years or whatever. But if you feel like this, if you believe like this, then you're that yellow person stepping out of the line. You've made yourself visible to the people that have an impact over your career. Sometimes that's your peers, sometimes that's your boss, it's variable. But they have an impact. They have an impact on the longevity of your career. Not only do we do the hiring, what else do we do? Firing, right? So keep that in mind. I try to do as little as possible. I made it 3 years without having to do it a single time. So that's good. But believe in your heart that you're this person and not this person. Because if you're doing this, you haven't taken the steps, you may not have taken the steps to make sure you're the person that's stepping out of the line and you're visible to your supervisor or your hiring committee. This one spoke to me, so this really has to do with knowing your weaknesses. Have a lot of people where I can see their chains, but they don't see their chains. We have people that think they're the nicest person in the world, but if you talk to any of their peers, they're the biggest jerk they've ever met. I have a lot of those. I wouldn't say I have a lot of those. I have some of those. They think they're the nicest person in the world. But you talk to anybody that works with them and they're just a jerk. That goes back to relationships, but it also goes back to knowing your weaknesses. A lot of people that don't know me think that I can be a jerk or that I'm intimidating or anything like that because I don't express a lot of emotion. That's just who I am. I had a vendor tell me last night, man, you got a steely face. I'm like, well, I'm listening to you. What are you talking about? You're talking, I'm listening. How's that a steely face? But, you know, take time to reflect on who you are, what your behaviors are, and don't assume. Ask your peers. Every couple of months, I give my staff, hey, give me your feedback. I try to pull it out of them because that's how I get better. I constantly ask my superintendent, how am I doing? Am I doing what you need of me? Am I going the right direction? Because her leadership style is she trusts me, she lets me do my job, which is great. But I still need that feedback to make sure I'm doing the right job. So take time, know where your limitations are. Words have power. So in my department, words matter is the way that I phrase it, but they didn't have a words matter image, so I had to use words have power. Use your words, choose your words properly. How many of you have dealt with a technician that in their best intention said the wrong thing to a customer or could have said it differently if they had just taken a few more seconds to think it out and you wouldn't have had an upset customer? I have many, many times. Words matter, so make sure you choose the right ones because again, we're human, we respond to words. Last night I had a vendor talking to me and they were using curse words all over the place. I use curse words, I got no problem with them. But in that environment, I'm a customer, you're a professional, do you think I'm gonna call them to sell me some product? Words matter, make sure you're using them in the right place and the right time because they can impact you. I've had an employee tell me once, I asked them, how come you didn't apply for that job? I'm not ready to take on a leadership role at this time. You know what I heard? I don't want to be a leader ever. That's what I heard. That's not what they said, but that's what I heard when you said that to me. I'm human, I'm imperfect, but that's what I heard. My wife made me put the X on. I was willing to go without the X. Don't be this guy or gal. This falls on the relationships. If you have a big enough staff, you have more than one of these. Portland Public, do you have one of these? We can all name them. Don't be that guy. Maybe you are that guy and you don't know it. That goes back to knowing what your chains are. Ask for feedback. Again, none of us are perfect. We all have weaknesses. A lot of times my weaknesses get confused for arrogance. I'm not arrogant, I'm confident as hell, but I invest a lot of time to earn that confidence. But I'm also fearful. Again, coming up here, I'm much more comfortable now, but coming first starting, sweaty armpits, nervous. I'm being judged, quote unquote, by 50-ish, 60 people. How many people put themselves in that positions regularly? I'm being judged by 5,000 people in Salem, but it's different when it's your peers. I can get up in front of a crowd of thousands and have done it, of people I don't know, don't care. I care about what you guys think of me because it influences me and what, we're a tight community, or at least hopefully a tight community, hopefully we feel that. So I care what Tricia thinks about me, or, Ben or somebody else. So, and I may have gotten, but don't be this guy. And if you feel that I'm this guy, tell me I'm that way. I invite my staff members to come in and tell me how I'm doing. So make sure you create that environment where it's safe for your peers or your supervisor or subordinates or whatever to tell you how you're doing. Because that's how you get better. Again, we're all imperfect beings, but if you want to improve, if you can't see your own change, and sometimes we can't because it's just who we are, make sure you're asking if somebody else sees change on you that you don't see. Finally, so this is a little bit of advertising. So superintendent brought in Outward Mindset. That's by Arbinger. Anybody ever read this book? How about Leadership and Self-Deception? You ever read the book Leadership and Self-Deception? Again, by the Arbinger Institute. Great books, but mindset controls so much of what we do. I was just reading a book by James Comey. Maybe you've heard of it. It's a recent book. Reading through that book, so I don't want to get into politics, but reading through that book, even though I have certain political views, I was able to change my mindset because in the book he clearly demonstrated his leadership. It's a type style of leadership that I respond to, that I respect. And so based on what he said about some of our former presidents, I changed my view of them. I changed my view both positively and negatively, even though we may not necessarily be aligned politically. You can still always change your mindset because that's different from what you believe. So I believe certain things, but I can change my mindset and how I respond differently. I don't know if that makes sense. But outward mindset, so I'm taking all of my staff through outward mindset. It really comes down to relationships. We're all humans, but sometimes in the workplace, we forget that. Sometimes it's just about getting the job done, and in so doing, we treat them like an object rather than a person. So for the positional leaders in the room, if you're struggling with how to move your team to the next level, or if your team is not all buddy-buddy like you would like them to be, and as a leader, you should want your team to be gelling and working collaboratively together. Outward mindset, even though it's a thing, and I have a lot of people that would tell me it's a thing, but when they go through, it's a 2-day workshop. I'm an Armiger facilitator. I'd be more than happy to come in and help. But it's great because really it just reminds us all that we're human, and you fall back on that. It helps me as I'm dealing with customers. I get a lot of complaints. I'm trying to deploy Surface Books to teachers, and I'm getting union complaints about changing their device. What's going to be your initial mindset? Okay, my initial mindset is going to be, what the hell? I'm giving you a new laptop. Your other one was 15 years old, and you give me a union complaint that I'm giving you a new device? That's my initial mindset. But as soon as I remember outward mindset, meaning I'm not focused on me, I'm focused on them, I'm able to step back and say, oh, maybe I should go ask them what their concerns are. But in that moment, when I first get that union complaint, I'm thinking about me going, what the hell? That doesn't make any sense. But if I step back for just a moment and think about them and what are their needs, their objectives, and their challenges, I see them in a completely different light. I usually pick up the phone, hey, let's go talk. I have a meeting next Monday. Go talk to a teacher. Find out, okay, you think the Surface Book won't work. A lot of times it's out of ignorance. A lot of times it's out of fear, anxiety. What are their needs? So that's just, again, it's a great program. It's really fast. It's a fast read. It's done in story forms, a lot of examples. But it gives, for me, it'll give my staff a language to use safely to basically say, hey, you're being selfish. But again, it uses language to do that safely. Most important thing, be happy. I love my job. I hate my job, but I love my job. I love my job because I get to do stuff like this. I hate my job when I gotta go find out why a teacher doesn't want a new computer. It's difficult. Yeah. But if you're not happy with your job, the job isn't the problem. Maybe you need to find a new job. And I'll tell that to any of my staff members and have multiple times. If you're not happy, I can't make you happy. I can give you that advancement, I can give you the raise, I can give you everything you think you need, but you're just grouchy. So find what makes you happy and do that. Because your job, even though it should make you happy, if you're not, it's not the job. You're unhappy with what you're doing, find something else to do that can make you happy. Okay? Anything? Now, who are the leaders in the room? Come on, everyone. Probably don't want to be at mine. Yeah. So believe that and don't think that it's something for higher ups. It's something I don't get paid for leader, or I'm not the CIO. They're the leaders. Be the leader. That's what gets you the title. You can get the title in other ways, but maybe it takes a lot longer. I wasn't a leader but from the time I was 17. I've had to learn this as I went. Now, as I get older and wiser and have more opportunities, leading 3 staff is different from leading 80. I might be ready to move on to the next challenge in my life. I don't know, I'm freaking my superintendent out right now. But, you know, believe in yourself and others will believe in you. And those others being your peers, your hiring supervisor, whatever. A lot of us move districts just within Oregon and Washington. So put yourself in uncomfortable situations like this, because people will see it. They're like, hey, yeah, I remember when Irvin did that karaoke. He's a really fun guy. People see that stuff. So, all right, am I out of time? I think I'm out of time. Close. Oh, no, I got 20 minutes. Let's have a discussion. No? No, 10 minutes, yeah. All right, any questions?
How do you as a leader in a position will handle, we talked about toxic people, a session maybe 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about somebody that's resistant to constructive criticism and might feel that it's more like attacking. How do you approach that and make it so it's not attacking them personally, but more of a professional that I want everybody to gel together?
You can only coach so much. It really depends on where their heart's at. Sometimes it's identifying their chains. You got to do it carefully. There's times where I'm a very direct communicator. All of my staff and ESD would say, yeah, that's Bob. I just tell it like it is. If you're being a jerk, I bring you in and say, look, you're being a jerk, Stacy. But if you don't think you're being a jerk, how do you hear me? What did you hear me say if you don't think you're being a jerk? Yeah. You just heard me attack you with that. So that's I would define that as a weakness in my leadership style is I can only say what I see. Sometimes I do try to figure out how to fluff it up for you. But most of the time it just comes out, here's the problem, how do we fix it? And the intent is always, look, I see you going on this path, how do I get you on this path? But it's not always heard that way. Cindy?
I don't think people practice that. Yes, you know where you stand, you know what I expect. It's clear, it's not political, it's not practical, it's expected, and then you figure out what you're really saying.
Right.
Practice it.
Yes and no, because relationships,
You need to fluff up,
right.
but that doesn't happen.
The higher you go, the more you have to be more situationally aware. So that comes down to what strategies you use, how to read people the right way, because the higher you go, the more, if I say the wrong thing to a principal, and to the wrong principal, or to that union representative, there's a lot more impact from my words, so you definitely have to be a lot more aware of what you say and how you say it. For toxic people, just get them out. That should be your number one mission. That was my number one mission coming into Salem. I had one, and at the end of 90 days, he was out. That's all I focused on, because I would not be able to do anything else with that toxicity in my environment.
With that toxic, like I said, that session was really good, and I thought about the toxic person, since you talked about that, been aware of it, and.
She's right next to you.
Sorry. Did you give them on a, kind of like a probation for the 90 days, and then it wasn't, because you said you had never had to fire anybody really, with the toxic person, did they leave on their own will?
No. I helped them find other opportunities. So when I say I've never fired, I've helped people resign. Yeah. But never without giving them the opportunity first to go better. I tried having conversations multiple times to find out where they were at, find out how I can get them going this direction and changing their attitude. And it was clear that their attitude was the problem. But in my first day meeting with this individual, I was told that he was the senior network administrator and he makes all decisions regarding the network. You know, in my mind, I'm thinking, you never met me before, have you? While I don't use power to wrong, I absolutely recognize my power and will use it as necessary to do what I need to do, which is make my superintendent successful. That's my number one goal. And by doing that, by focusing on that, that influences everything else that I do. And it's not my superintendent, my boss, who happens to be the superintendent. That's my job. That should be your job. Make your boss successful, because we'll see that. Because none of us can do it by ourselves. We need you to do that for us.
Okay, Bob, when you're talking about the toxic people blame, is that person by chance union represented or not?
Yes.
Union rep?
Yep. They created an opportunity to be insubordinate, and I took advantage of the opportunity to encourage a resignation. So I didn't influence or manipulate anything. I gave an order. They willingly disobeyed. I willingly helped them resign. That's an unfortunate reality that we have to do sometimes, but it has to happen at times if you're in these positions.
Can you talk a little bit more about coming into this established team, established culture, especially in this light of coming from a smaller team to an exponentially larger team? What was your strategy coming in the door there?
Relationships. Build relationships. Again, first thing I did was meet with district administration, and then I met with my team. Spent 2 months having one-on-ones, an hour at a time, with my teammates, and just finding out what was going on, building that relationship, letting them know, hey, office. The end. Yeah, I mean, just building those relationships, rebuilding the trust. There was a severe lack of trust that it had existed in the department for a long time. So just relying on that. And then again, I'm direct. I assert my authority as needed. So sometimes it's a little bit of you shall. Sometimes it's a little bit of how do we. But it was a combination of both. The you shall helped those that were resistant. The how do we help those that were willing. So it's really just a whole strategy, but combined, it's just building those relationships. Because if your people trust you, they'll do anything for you. At least I hope they will. So far, we've been able to accomplish a hell of a lot. But just building those relationships. Don't just because I'm the CIO and yes, I'm busy, but I will always make time for my staff if they need. You have to do that. You not just say it, you have to do it. And I say my office is, so this goes back to the slide on say what you'll do. I tell my employees, if you want to bitch and moan, we're humans, we have to do that sometimes. Come into my office or go outside. Don't do it in the environment, in the culture, because that influences the culture negatively. And so about maybe a year ago now, guy came to my office, I made a hiring decision. He's like, what the hell? And he meant, what the hell are you doing? And he still works for me today, and I hope that the fact that he's still here, I didn't yell at him. I said, hey, sit down, let's talk. I'll explain to you why I did that. I hope that changed his mindset, that it is a trusting environment, that, if I say that I'll do something, that I'll live up to that. So, but build that trust with your staff. And it's hard to do, and it takes time. That's my job during the day, is my staff and other meetings. I do all my work at night, which is unfortunate, but that's the reality of my position. So, all right, I think I used all your time. Hey, thanks so much. Thanks for engaging. Hopefully you find that useful. Let me know when you're off.